I think if I could coach myself, I would go back and try to tell myself, just try to enjoy it a little bit more. Try to understand the moment and try to be in the moment a little more rather than worrying about what's next and and what the future is. I always worry too much about the future, whether that's in my job, no matter what it is in my life, that I could slow things down and enjoy the moment a little bit more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Fast Friends, a Metal Factory production. Today, and I've been made fun of for saying this over and over again, but this is one of my fastest friends, not only because of the Olympic record that he's still part of holding, but from somebody that I met at a U-23 camp, and we instantly connected at the fact that we were both meatheads in the sport of rowing. I was fortunate enough to earn his friendship where I lived with him. I got to be in his wedding, but he is one of the rarest rowers we have in our American history where he not only was he a walk-on, not only did he make an Olympic team, not only did he win a gold medal, but he also had the courage to stop after that and go on to make a bunch of dog food. And I'm really excited to talk to a friend that I haven't seen in way too long, but has never lost a place in my heart. And Joey Hansen, it is very exciting to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, man. This was when you hit me up about this, I figured, hell, why not? This should be pretty fun. Obviously, like you said, you and I haven't connected in quite a while. Luke, I think the last time I saw you was 2015, maybe in the
Yeah.
Crew Classic in San Diego. Justin, probably last time I saw and talked to you was '01 or '02 or something. That
Oh, what?
right?
It's only been 24 years. This is cool.
And Steve, who's usually with us, is in the background wrangling his two twin sons, so he'll join us eventually. So he is here. But Steve's also the person that had to fill your seat when you decided to walk away. So I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic of when he comes back on. But Justin, let's do Joey the Metal Factory way and let the audience know why he's here.
Yeah, thanks, man. Super excited to have you on, Joey. I think one of the things that we do is we like to tell the audience a bit of your bio because we found that a lot of our guests are too humble to tell their own. So I'll do it for you. Keep me honest. But, just to give the audience a bit of background. So Joey's originally, from California, from Bakersfield, and wound up being about a football and baseball athlete in high school, self-described as not really a standout athlete whatsoever, but obviously was on the playing field. Wound up going to Oregon State University where he majored in engineering and discovered rowing in college, which we'll get into, which really set the stage for the later part of his rowing career, which we'll certainly unpack on the show, which ultimately landed him on the top step of the 2004 Olympics, winning Olympic gold medal, setting a course record, Olympic record that still stands today. And, was on the national team for 4 years and then raced in world championships, medaled in world championships, and then, wound up being inducted into the National Rowing Hall of Fame with his '04 teammates. So certainly really impressive rowing background. But I think it's going to be important to really learn about the journey, Joey, and the pre and post oarsmanship. But I think it'd be great if you could kind of kick us off. I obviously just scratched the surface, but tell us a little bit about like where you're from. Tell us about you. Obviously there's a lot of accolades that somebody could Google, but I think it's way better to hear from you first person.
Yeah, I think I could do that.
Wait,
So,
it's about yourself.
so I'm assuming you guys can hear me fine, right?
Yeah, you're great, man.
Okay, good. So I grew up. Well, I was born in the biggest little city in the world, right? So born in Reno, Nevada. I think my parents ended up leaving there. My dad was kind of a travel whore, I'll say. He worked for Payless drugstores. Luke, you might remember that. That was
Yeah, I remember.
mostly a West Coast thing. And he moved around a lot. I mean, we probably from the time he married my mom till the time I was about 5, I think he had worked at probably 10 different stores across California and even in Nevada. So, I was born in Reno, but he finally ended up leaving Payless and joining the family business, family moving and storage business in Bakersfield, California. His brother and his dad had started back in I think, mid 70s, 75, something like that.
Or after Arnold Schwarzenegger destroyed it in Running Man.
The Butcher of Bakersfield is what you're referring to?
Yes.
No, that was definitely before.
Okay. Just
Um,
making sure. Timeline right.
Yeah, so I think we settled down in Bakersfield in the mid '80s, about '85. So my entire memory starts in Bakersfield. Great place to grow up. Bakersfield, I definitely think gets a bit of a bad rap because it's kind of known as the armpit of California for good reason, but it's a farming community, deeply red community. Our recent claim to fame is, that's where Speaker of the House, Kevin. I can't believe I can't remember his last name. Come on, guys, help me out with this. Speaker of the House that got chewed out after 9 months. Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy was the recent claim to fame from Bakersfield, but deeply red.
Think Bakerfield guy.
Kevin Harvick, yeah, NASCAR Kevin Harvick guy, yeah, good.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
yeah, good point.
So Justin, you said it right. I grew up playing football, playing baseball. I was in Boy Scouts. I was an Eagle Scout. Just sort of kind of like the typical. I don't know. I very much appreciated my childhood. I think my parents were awesome parents. I have one brother who has his own athletic story, but I think I was the type that wanted to kind of fly the coop faster than my brother. When I had the opportunity to, after I graduated high school to leave, I jumped on it. So whereas my brother, he went to local JC for a couple of years and then ended up getting a scholarship to play football at Pittsburgh. But I wanted out. I thought I wanted out of California for good. I thought I just wanted out, right? Not because I didn't love my parents, I didn't love my family. I was just the type that wanted to be on my own. So I found my way to Oregon. Oregon State is where I ended up, applied at many different schools. I applied at a couple schools in Seattle. I did apply at some schools in California, but when Oregon State accepted me, I jumped on it. I fell in love with the campus the minute I had visited it, right as I was applying. Oregon State is definitely, after 4 2/3 year, it was definitely the type of place that I couldn't wait to leave. There was just too much rain. I grew up in Bakersfield where we might get 5 inches of rain, and Corvallis got 65 inches of rain. So just way too much rain for me, but man, it was a really fun college experience. I mean, not only was I able to get my degree, of course, but I got introduced to the sport of rowing. Some of you guys might know and remember Matt Imes. Matt Imes was my freshman coach in college. He was the one that filled my head with Olympic stories and Olympic hopes from literally the first, God, 4 weeks. So at Oregon State, you gotta sign up for what's called a PAC class, physical activity course or physical athletic course, something, whatever it's called. So it's a 1 credit PAC class, and he and Jane La Riviere, who's the women's coach today up at Washington State, they were the two freshman coach for men and women, and they saw me walking around in the quad. Literally, I think it was the summer before my freshman year. Matt saw me. Him and Jane were running like a booth, and they were like, "Hey, are you an athlete?" And I was like, "Well, not really. I mean, I played sports in high school, but I don't plan to play any sports in college." And Matt was like, "Yeah, that's not going to happen. You're going to need to try out for the rowing team." So he signed me up um, or got me to sign up for this 1 credit PAC class. And the first day of school, first day of college, show up at the boathouse. I'm probably one of, I don't know, 40, 50 guys, because that's basically how they started the freshman team at Oregon State. I think in that entire team, we had one guy that had rowed in high school, a guy named Adam Hughes, who I rowed with for the next 4 years. Great guy, was from Eugene, but he was the only one with rowing experience. So, it was up to Matt Imes to try to build a freshman team. And so he did, right? I think we surprised some folks. My freshman year, I think we ended up taking, I don't know, sixth or did we make the grand final? No, I don't think we made the grand final as a freshman day. I think we got eighth. Now that I think about it, but I think that there was just kind of some hope around my class. Um, and as kind of history goes, it didn't end up being my class. It was the class after me that probably did the best. Some of you guys remember Josh Inman. Josh Inman was also from Oregon State. His senior class ended up kind of really shocking, I think. Ended up fourth in the country his senior year. But anyways, going back to my 4 years in college, just awesome. I mean, great, like I said, great group of guys that I rode with for 4 years. Great school. College town was awesome. Couldn't wait to get back to school every year. was in a sense sad to leave, but I got my degree, I got rowing out of it, and then of course, I met Erin, I met my wife, my fiance. We ended up getting hitched. Sorry, we ended up getting engaged February of 2002. So I was in my 5th year at school. I had just done my first year on the national team. Erin and I had been together for, God, most of college. I think we started dating midway through my sophomore year. And so we ended up getting engaged. I show up back in Princeton again in 2002. Mike had a lot of things to say to me about that, but nevertheless, we're married today still on some great kids. And but if I go back to kind of leaving Oregon State, I definitely felt
Well,
like
well, before you leave Oregon State, because like you're glossing over a lot, and I'm not going to let you do it. You can't get out of this. You can't squirm out. You can't squirm out of this, man. I haven't got to, I haven't got to talk to you. Uh, you weren't a mediocre football player. Like you were pretty good. You weren't a mediocre place for like for high school. Like it wasn't horrible, but you had some athletic chops. You're not little. You're 6'7", 210 pounds, very athletic. Ryan, your brother, was a starter at Pitt, so there's athletic prowess in the family. And what I'm really interested in is because we have, it's been fun talking to the walk-ons, and we know that 50% of Olympic medalists for the U.S. are walk-ons, so people have never touched an oar.
is that it? I actually thought it was way higher than
It depends on the boat. One person sways that a little bit, but my my real question of discovery is what kept you, one, IMS got you to go to the boathouse, but can you take us a little bit to like when you got to that first practice as a kid from Bakersfield? You're in basically a desert farming town. Now you're somewhere where it's raining all the time, and someone's basically saying, wear spandex, sit in your ass, go backwards. And like you kept showing up, right? I think before you even get to Princeton, like, let's talk about how you went from the desert to the rain and this outdoor sport that trains year round. You just kept showing up. So can you tell us a little bit what kept you attracted or attached to that oar?
Yeah, no, thanks for stopping me, Dan. I think you're right. I was about to gloss over some really important stuff there.
I was gonna tease you about, you and Aaron had a little right there.
Yeah.
Lapse in judgment.
My God, you got way too good of a memory. So no, you're right. I mean, look, I appreciate your words, but believe me, I was not a good, I was not a great football or baseball player. In the
I said great. I said good.
Yeah, and good is probably even a stretch. Like I really liked baseball. I was a good hitter. I was typically a DH. And when I was playing on the field, I was a first baseman. And that's all because number one, I'm slow. I had an absolutely horrific 40 meter dash time. Sorry, 40-yard dash time. So I was slow and I had no accuracy in throwing a baseball, but I still loved it. I had played it since I was in Boy Scouts, and I played T-ball. Absolutely love baseball. Football, on the other hand, funny enough, I only played 2 years of baseball in high school. My junior and senior year, I decided to quit baseball and focus on football. Even though, like thinking back, I was probably better at baseball. I decided I just wanted to focus on football. Sure, by my senior year, I was maybe big enough to play more. I was not a starter. I also went to an extremely competitive high school. Like Bakersfield High School was typically a ranked high school in the country, always a ranked high school in the state. That's probably just an excuse, to be honest. But I just was not athletically gifted to be good at football. I had height, and that was about it. I didn't have speed. I didn't have good hands. Mm. And I was always too skinny, man. I was perfectly built for the sport of rowing. And even maybe even baseball to an extent, if I could have figured out how to throw a ball. Like I still think to this day that I could have been a good pitcher. Um, but I never, nobody was ever going to spend the time or the money on developing my pitching abilities because I didn't have any good. And I never showed that I could be good at it at any point in time. But as I look back, I think that, man, I was really built well to be a good pitcher. But nonetheless, it never happened. So making the transition to Oregon State and rowing, you made a comment, Dan, about, what kept me going to practice every single day. There's one thing that kept me going to practice every single day, and that's Matt Ives. I had a coach literally that in the first couple of weeks, you spend a lot of time in the water. It's fall, it's still decent weather, it's not raining every single day, it's raining every other day, but the weather is good enough. The weather is good enough to be on the water in the fall for the first month. And so 80% of the practices were, in eights. We probably had 3 or 4 eights across the river. The Willamette River, is a really fast river. You row downstream. It takes 10 minutes to go, as far downstream as you want. It takes, 45 minutes to get back up, or an hour to get back up. So the first couple of weeks, you spend a lot of time in the boat. And at that point, I don't know that I was this great standout. I had height. And I think Matt probably had his eyes on me. I'll tell you what did it. Right. We did a couple of erg sessions, and this is where I really started to understand the saying that ignorance is bliss. Like, 18 years old, I didn't know what the term or the phrase ignorance is bliss really meant. But like for me, it was the perfect way to describe the beginning of my ergometer rowing venture career, if you want to call it, because I'll never forget it, dude. I sat on an erg, and Matt had us do a 5K for time. And we did most of our erg sessions in this barn, this rundown barn that amazingly still stands today, because I was back at Oregon State in September of this last year. I was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and that barn is still standing
Congrats.
today.
A little late, but congrats.
Right. I think of my 8, I was the last one, but funny enough, Josh Inman got into the Hall of Fame before I did.
We did better at the IRA.
True. And so funny enough, we're sitting in this barn, and this is where all the ergometer, rowing practices were held when it was too wet outside or the river was going too fast. I came to love and hate the barn, but it's freshman year, maybe 3 weeks in, and Matt sits us down in the erg and says, "Hey, do a 5K for time." Somebody do the math for me really quick. But I went the equivalent of a 140, a 140 for 5K. My first time doing a piece. What is that time wise? Is that 16:20?
I don't remember 5Ks, but it's essentially a 20-minute 6K, which was elite at that time, especially for your first.
Yeah, so I went the equivalent of, thank you, Dan, for that. I went the equivalent of a 146K for 5K. The very first time sitting on the machine. And I'll tell you guys, like, I probably did half the piece at a 2-minute split and half of the piece at a 120 split. Like that's how that's how horrible it was. But I got off the piece, and I was pretty tired, and Matt came over to me and said that was absolute dog shit. But he wanted to meet with me the next day because I'm pretty sure I blew everybody out of the water. And so he basically set it up so that I'd come talk to him at, I don't know, 11 o'clock or something in the afternoon. And all the coaches, Matt, Dave Reichman, you guys know Dave Reichman. Dave was the varsity coach. All the athletic coaches, whether it was gymnastics or it was baseball or it was rowing or it was football, they all had offices in the basketball coliseum, in what we called Gill Coliseum, in the basketball venue. So I show up in his office, and clearly Matt had been talking to the other coaches about what I had done the night before, whether it was Jane or it was Dave. And so I kind of got introduced to both of them for the first time. And Dave obviously took some interest in me pretty quickly at that time. And Matt literally says, "Hey, let's go talk." And so we go and we talk, and he takes me into Gill Coliseum. And look, Oregon State doesn't exactly have a storied athletic history, but there are some things, there are some people and some teams kind of intermittently spattered throughout the years that, wore orange and black and did some cool things. One of them being Gary Payton. Gary Payton went to Oregon State his freshman year, sort of kind of I don't know, shock the world with how good he was. And he was just a freshman at Oregon State. I mean, nothing special, or school being nothing special, but he certainly was. We end up starting, believe it or not, we end up starting the year. His sophomore year, I don't pretend to remember what year it is. I want to say it was somewhere around 1992. Oregon State ends up starting the year off in the preseason polls, number one in the country in men's NC2A basketball. Now we crashed and burned. I think we got to the tournament and got ousted before the round of 16. But Gary Payton was splattered all over Gill Coliseum. So I think he went 4 years. I don't even know, but so I think his last year was 96. You guys know he ended up going to in the NBA, played for the Seattle Supersonics mostly. And so Gill Coliseum is just kind of spattered with all things Gary Payton, because my freshman year was 1997, right? So it wasn't long after Gary Payton left. And so I remember sitting inside Gill Coliseum with Matt sitting next to me. And it's literally at this time, you guys, that Matt Imes is filling my head with everything and anything that has to do with the national team, Olympics, Mike Teti. We had just won in France, because that was the summer of 97, right? We just won our first medal. And so I'm starting to hear about these names, like this guy named Chris Aarons. Of course, I'm hearing about Pete Chipolone. I'm hearing about Mike Teti and all these people, right? That we all come to sort of kind of glorify, in the years that I wrote on the national team. And that is, to try to bring this full circle, that is what kept me super interested, was Matt Imes filling my head with Olympic stories and Olympic glory, and him telling me what I was capable of. Because honestly, guys, like, I had never heard these kinds of things in my entire life. So I'm just like a sponge soaking up all of this talk about possibilities.
Yeah,
But
I think that's super interesting, right? Because I think that I'd love to understand the ignorance meets just, we've heard this a lot on the show where some of us are part of this cohort. You have a coach that takes an extreme interest in you, and all of a sudden your invincibility goes very high, right? And your belief and delusion becomes very, very, very real. So I'm interested to understand, like, just how that all worked out for you, given, look, you're probably being humble about it, but you're self-described as like, hey, I did 2 years as a baseball player, did 2 years as a football player. None of them were getting me necessarily recruited to a Division I level or anything like that. Next thing I know, I got a guy after basically a 20-minute piece at most telling me, like, you're gonna be in the Olympics, like, and then that obviously plants a very deep seed. So I'd love to understand, like, what was the step change that then happened as you're like, all right, I'm in it, I'm dialed in. Now, how do I harness that?
okay, so I do this 5K piece, and I think that was like the first and only piece for a number of months where I actually went fast. Like, because then you start understanding, 500-meter split times. You start understanding, and I made the comment, ignorance is bliss. Like, once I truly started understanding what those numbers meant, it's almost like they played mind tricks on me,
Yeah, it
because
gets
things just got exponentially harder. And so I never, I think I barely broke I think I barely broke 20 minutes on a 6K that year. I think I never went faster than I went. My fastest 2K time my freshman year was 6:19. Like, not that great. Not horrible. Fastest on the team, sure, but not, what, the rest of the U23s were doing. I showed up to U23 after my sophomore year, and I think at that point in time, trying to remember what my fastest time was. I think I went 6:03, 6:01 or something after my sophomore year. I wasn't Jamie Schroeder, I wasn't Dave Simon, I wasn't, breaking 6 minutes. It wasn't until I think my junior senior where I finally broke 6 minutes, and I went like 5:58 or something, my junior. Anyways, so I think I think that ignorance is bliss thing it really describes a lot of my rowing career. I think, even, Dan Walsh, Luke Walton, like all of those guys had much more of a pedigree and knew just a lot more. If I think back to the people in my rowing career that I felt or I thought were the really smart guys and had it all figured out, like the first guy that came to mind for me, Luke McGee. Luke McGee,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
dude.
He was he
Luke
was
was
the guy with
Luke, golden child.
he was a bit of the golden child. But the thing about Luke is he exuded this confidence that made you think he had it all figured out. Right? When you and I were at Cornell in 20 sorry, in what was that?
Yeah,
99
it was
when we were in
90.
Cornell for U23.
Let my memory help. It's not like I do a show now for a living or anything. Because I think it's important for two reasons. One is what's it to me. It's also the time capsule of like no internet, no cell phones, nothing. Luke's on the West Coast too, right at Cal. That's beginning at the same time as he was starting to begin this legacy that he's part of, and we start to know about each other, right? Because these scores get submitted, and there's a printout of these things. And so, like, I remember distinctly the '99 Nations Cup camp when it was called Nations Cup. It's now U23s. To your point, like McGee, and it was also '99, so there's a Pan Am team. So I think that the depth of what U.S. rowing was, our senior team had just won back-to-back world championships. So like U.S. American rowing was on top, and especially in those eights. And that U23 team was packed full of all kinds of crazy college talent. And to your point, McGee, I think at that point was like a 550.
No way.
Yeah,
What?
I think he was. I think at that time he was. And Dave Simon did not do his crazy 541 yet, but we got to that Nations Cup team, and I remember kind of feeling the same way as you. Is like, yes, I was a junior rower, but because I had gone to Northeastern, I did not have pedigree. And McGee and Winters rode together at Brown, and they believed that they had just they were on their ascent. And I think that the interesting part about that depth of talent, and especially like again, maybe I remember more about it than you forget from an outsider, but it wasn't like you and I were doing great in that U23 camp. Like you and I spent a lot of time on the erg on that dock, beating the crap at each other on it for a while. I think that's where we kind of bonded. And then you ruined it all for yourself when you went water skiing and dislocated your shoulder.
And I think you would agree that was probably, looking back, probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me.
I agree, but I think that just to reference for the audience and to show the insanity of what it was, Cornell was that bunkhouse at the time. We all lived in it, no air conditioning. It was decided before we fresh air and mosquitoes. Luke is over at the Pan Am camp, basically getting told if you don't make Pan Ams, you're automatically in that boat. So we knew that even though there were like 16 guys at this U23 camp, only 4 of them were going to make it. Everybody else was cut anyway because 4 to 6 guys were going to come from Princeton and take our seats. So we were having fun. And Joey, who was it that was trying to reset your shoulder in the boat? Like, take him to an ER. Somebody was trying to reset your shoulder.
It was that jackass from Navy, Todd.
Tad Duas? Is that his name?
I don't remember his last name. It was the guy.
Yeah,
It was the
so-
guy.
So, he's in a boat, dislocated shoulder, and because we're all afraid of getting cut and yelled at, we're trying to jank his shoulder.
Where were you, athletic training major? Like, where were you in all this, Dan?
I was on the dock.
Martin, you didn't go out.
His arms dangling out, and they're like, "I can jank." And it was like, and all the other starboards were like, "Sweet, one down."
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Yeah. So let me finish that kind of
All right.
bit of that story though before I answer that question. They finally, somehow get myself on the boat. They get me to the dock. Was the other guy from Cal? Do you guys remember Graham? Was it Graham Taylor?
Graham Taylor.
Graham at that U23 camp, Dan?
Yes.
Okay, because I think he's the one that drove me. Anyway, so I think he drove me in this janky beat up asshole. I don't even know why he had his car there, but this janky little car, he sits me in the front seat and so they take me to the emergency and they end up putting me under. The emergency room ends up putting me under, completely sedating me to pop my shoulder back in place because the methods that normally weren't working. And it was just excruciating pain. I couldn't take it anymore. So they put me under, they're able to manipulate my shoulder, and they basically set me on my way. Oh God damn, do you remember this? My brother. So we were in Cornell. My brother was in Pittsburgh at this time. My brother came up and visited us at some point during that time. So let's just say I got hurt at like week 4 or week 5. My brother came up to visit us and visit me in like week 3. And on the weekend that my brother came up, we went to this nasty ass strip club. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, dude. Toppers.
It was
That's in Georgia.
it was
Yeah.
the most disgusting strip club known to man. I just remember seeing like flies. I remember seeing flies flying around and landing on these girls as they're dancing in front of us.
It had carnival ride lights, like hot wired to car batteries.
Yeah. So my brother comes back and picks me up after, the doctor relocates my shoulder and says,
I'm sorry. Just text.
Listening.
so my brother comes and picks me up after, all of my all of my problems with my shoulder. And he takes me to the University of Pittsburgh. It's funny how things work out. He takes me to the University of Pittsburgh, who had this world-renowned orthopedic shoulder surgeon, and he asks his sports guy if, can we get another X-ray or an MRI of my brother's shoulder set up? Of course, I had insurance from my parents. My parents just kind of like let my brother deal with me, but I was pretty quickly kind of whisked into an MRI when I got to Pittsburgh, and they ended up seeing a decent amount of damage in my shoulder, and from the dislocation and potentially from the relocation as well. And so I ended up having a pretty extensive
Failed
shoulder.
attempts by a Navy pilot.
Thanks, Todd. And so I ended up having a pretty extensive shoulder surgery where they put a couple of screws in my greater tuberosity to repair it. And I mean, guys, like I had from basically from August 1, because it was probably somewhere around that time, let's just call it August 1, until probably December of my sophomore year, I had a lot of rehabilitation that I went through. Like I hit rehab hard. School didn't start at Oregon State until the end of September. So I went back to school for almost 2 months and did nothing but rehab. So bad that the rehab lady in the sports athletic department, her name's Kim, he would like manipulate my shoulder to try to get scar tissue broken up so much that she was taking Motrin because her hands were swelling up. But I actually found her more recently, actually right after the Hall of Fame thing that I was at, and I reached out to her and I thanked her, and because she didn't, I don't think she knew my story, like she didn't know that I
good
had
for
gone
you.
on.
Good
So I
for you.
reached out to her and said, "Hey, I owe you a lot, blah blah blah," because she really helped me out. And so, to answer your question, finally, Justin and Luke, why did I say ignorance, or what? Why did I say that
Thing.
why was it the best thing that happened to me? Because what I didn't do was make a poor first impression on Mike. At some point in that U23 summer, Dan, I'm assuming you went, but Mike either came down or we went, or that group went to wherever Mike was. And if I had if I had made that impression on Mike as being an absolutely horrific rower, I think my entire rowing career could have ended up a lot different.
Yeah, super fair
My-
assessment.
Right? Because my junior year, so U23, yeah, it was after sophomore year. My junior year, Mike shows up at Oregon State in the early spring, I guess. Sorry. Mike shows up at Oregon State to put his eyes on another rower that we had. His name was Andy Lagarde. Andy was a senior that year. His junior year, he had gone 603. Andy had was trying to make inroads to getting in front of Mike. Mike basically shows up at Oregon State to take a look at Andy. He didn't come to Oregon State to look at Joey Hansen. Yeah, I was there. Yeah, he knew I was an under 23 guy, but he came to look at Andy. And so we went out on the water. You guys are gonna laugh. We went out in the water. We did a couple pieces, of course. So Dave Reichman's, running the practice and 2 8 side by side. I don't even know if I was in the same boat as Andy Lagarde, but we did maybe a couple minute pieces or some shit. And then we get off the water and Mike's like, hey, why don't you guys all go do a 500-meter piece for time? Right up, exactly what Mike Teti loves, right? Like, go do a sprint on the erg for time. And so I sit my ass right next to Andy Lagarde and I fucking waxed him, guys. Like, I don't remember what my time was, but I went significantly faster than him. And he was like, Andy was pissed. And so then, we all get off the erg and, let's just say there's a group of like 20 of us that just got off the erg. And Mike wants to, give us one last little, hey, nice to see you guys. Great to be at practice. And the first thing Mike does is he lays into me in front of everybody. And he basically tells me, yeah, you just did a fast 500-meter piece for me, but you didn't pull near as hard as you did on the water like you did on that 500-meter. And so like I was like freaked out. Like I was like, oh shit, well there goes that, right? I didn't make a good first impression on Mike Teti. Needless to say, like he didn't give two shits about Andy Lagarde. Like I think he felt like he wasted his time, but at least he saw who I was. From my standpoint, at least he saw who I was. And that was kind of when I showed up at Princeton the first time, I was worried about that, but he didn't remember. Like if you were to ask him, he would not remember that story to this day. Like there's no way he remembered Joey Hansen at Oregon State pulling a 500-meter piece, or nor did he probably remember laying into me in front of everybody.
Have you ever asked him?
Dude, I've never had that kind of relationship with Mike where I just sit down and talk with him and shoot the shit. Shame on me, but I've never really wanted to. I've never really had the desire.
You again, like you had the under 23 experience. You had obviously Imes kind of like give you the Mount Rushmore of Mike syndrome. So like when he shows up, are you like, oh shit, like it's on, like he's here today, or were you just like, oh, he's not here to see me? Like I just curious, like what was your mindset for that day? Like, oh, did you have a mindset of he might not be here for me, but I'm gonna make sure it's my show? I don't know if you're wired that way. Some people are, some people aren't. Or are you just like, let him come look at Andy and whatever happens, yeah, whatever.
So I think the latter. I am not the kind of guy that likes
Yeah.
to steal the limelight, but I definitely sensed I had an opportunity. Believe me, like I was perfectly fine being the number 2 that he was there for, but I needed to make sure that he saw number 2. And Andy and I, we got along fine. We were never going to be best friends. He's just not the type of guy that I like to hang out with. He was your typical frat guy. Like he was not a good dude. Andy was like the team captain. And funny story, his senior year, we went to Pac-10s. We got third, and Andy and a couple of seniors decide that they're going to drink while we were in Sacramento at Pac-10s. You guys know a little bit about Dave Reichman. Like that guy's straight laced. He didn't let Andy race. Like he was our team captain. He was the stroke of our boat. He didn't let Andy race. So kind of a weird deal, right?
Yeah, certainly.
Well, so because like there's a couple things that I find interesting in this, because from the injury, from the surgery, right? Also like the kind of kismet surgery that Ryan got you into this, this top tier Division I athletic training room with some of the top surgeons. You are contributing to Oregon State getting better, but as I remember, like that junior year, especially that spring, Mike Teti's there. He pulled the 500, leads us into 2000. I remember you and I beating the crap out of each other to not get last in the B final, and I still think about this as interesting. Like no texting, kind of some emails. Somehow you and I stayed in touch. There's two things. One is you didn't go to the 2000 U23 camp, correct? And neither did I. Like I was finishing school, and Luke, you went.
What'd you do that summer?
I had to do class because Northeastern was on the quarter system, so I had I was already behind because of rowing, so I had to do classes that summer. And similar to you, that best thing to happen to me. But what I'm really interested in is like you have this guy Andy, you beat the shit out of him on the erg. I don't even know his name, don't recognize him. I think we're trying to stay up at that point. You're trying to stay up on the competition. Did that awaken something on you when you were able to just smoke? Like, were you beating him in other workouts? Like, at that point, you established that you could be the top dog. Yet, so like, you just said you were okay being number 2, but in reality, you had the potential to be number 1. So, how did you push that into your senior year? Because that is the year you get invited to the senior team, and 2, you also have Birdman, Josh Inman coming up behind you, who's equally impressive potential coming in. And as you said, so I'm really interested in that senior year of yours. So you do a national team camp, you dislocate your shoulder, you get it fixed, you kick this guy's ass in front of the national team coach, and now you're going into your senior year of college. How does that set you up to get invited to camp in that 2001 Thunderdome that we were all part of?
Yeah, so after my junior year, it was 2000, right? The year you were talking about that you were in school. After our junior year, I went to Seattle and did a pair camp where I met guys like Matt Deacon, right? So I rode in Seattle for a summer of 2000, at the UW Boathouse. I was up there for, I don't know, 8 weeks at an internship at this startup internet company called Locate Networks. Dave basically told me, Joey, you need to learn how to move a boat. So go up to the pair camp, spend 8 weeks, row with some guys that, you know, can probably row a pair better than you can, and they certainly were.
On the chef.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I mean, I learned a lot that summer. It humbled me because I didn't make the top pair. The top pair went on to club nationals. Deacon was probably that guy if I had to guess. But I got to row with Deacon. Some of the best rowing I ever did was with Deacon, with Luke Walton, and certainly with Wolf Moser. But Deacon taught me a lot. And even in all the other guys I rowed with that summer taught me a lot. So I think that it was humbling and very educational, and I got to experience Seattle in the summer, which is amazing. Had a lot of fun, and it set me up for my senior year. To answer your question, I was basically by the end of my junior year going faster than Andy was. Andy had realized that his rowing career was going to be over after his senior year, anyways. He, I think, for all intents and purposes, gave up. I think one of the kind of daggers in the heart was he was trying and trying and trying to break 6 minutes for 2K, and I did it in front of him, right next to him. I think he went like 6:03 and I went 5:59 my junior year. And so I broke 6 minutes in front of him, and it just sort of kind of, it was kind of the nail in the coffin for him. But he was certainly not the guy that I was the most worried about, because I definitely at that point in time wanted more for my rowing career than just doing really well in college, right? I had ideas of grandeur at that point.
When
So I,
when do you can you identify when that gear shifted in your head? Because I'm always curious of like when, like, and you're articulating it really well, but saying like I had delusions of grandeur, right? Like Akil used the word delusions. Like we it is a delusion, but your confidence has changed even in your story right now as you said that. And so like, is there a clear moment in your senior year where you're like, no, I want more?
my senior year, I remember Doug Adams. You guys probably don't remember a guy named Doug Adams. He didn't really do much in rowing, but I remember talking to him in Seattle that summer. He was a good pair rower, rowed for UW. We were both juniors. And I had told him, because I'd been to the U23 camp the summer before with you, and I had told him that, my desire was to row on the national team. I wanted to make the senior team. And I remember him laughing in my face because I wasn't a good rower, obviously, right? I wasn't a good pairs rower. I had a fast erg, and that's really all I had at that point. And I remember him laughing in my face. And so if you want to be honest, that was a moment, not just Matt Imes telling me I could and Dave Reichman telling me I could, but it was moments like that where a guy like Doug Adams, who was at best barely able to make the UW varsity team, it was moments like that where I felt like, I can do this. I felt like I had found a sport that was well suited for me. I had the size, I had the strength, I had the lung capacity to do this. I also had when was it? I got my VO2 max. I had a VO2 max test done at Oregon State. I don't remember why or when, but I remember finding out that the guy that tested me, we didn't do it on an erg. We did it very traditional methods. I did it on a
Treadmill.
I did it on a treadmill, and when results came back, he told me, he's like, "Look, like you have larger than normal lungs." I certainly wasn't Brian Volpenheim. I wasn't Lance Armstrong, and he made sure to he made sure to say, "Hey, like, look, you have above average lung capacity, but you don't have like magnificent lung capacity. Like you're not like completely off the charts, but you are for your size. Your lungs are, a little bit bigger than the average person your size." And so when you start adding all those things up, and then you got guys that are telling you can't do it, like that was probably it, Dan. I mean, I was very lucky to be able to be invited back to the senior national team in Princeton after '01, after my senior year. I absolutely think Dave and Matt had something to do with that. 100%. There's no other way for me to believe besides an erg score and Dave and Matt that I was able to be invited back there. Sorry, I got to do this really quick. And so wish my memory was better, but I ended up showing up. I ended up getting invited somehow. I ended up showing up. This was the same weekend that I think Mike was turning 50.
Oh yeah, dude. I totally
showed up-
forgot about that. Well, no,
I-
was it him and Kay got married?
You know what? That might have been it. Yeah, you're right. It was. Yeah, they were getting married. And was it though? Yeah, it must.
Whatever. One or the other. This is not Mike Teti's story. It's a Joey Hansen. I said tell Mike Teti.
So I show up and I was late. For some reason, I was late because Oregon State finished later than everybody else because we were on quarters, right? We started at the end of September. We finished in the middle of June. Most of you guys had already showed up. So a lot of you guys already had your first practice. And so I think I flew in on a Friday night. I end up meeting Matt. Matt takes me to the Aquinas. And basically, I had got my bag with me. Matt basically introduces me to Father Tom and just drops me off. And I'm just like, okay, so I'm going to live in this kind of shithole in some bunk bed, and it's way too hot. But I get up the next morning, and my first practice is a Saturday morning, and it's hot as shit. It's humid as shit. All of you guys that are already most of you guys knew each other. I think, Dan, you were like the only one that I really knew. Yeah, I knew McGee, I knew Winters, but not really because I never really got to know them. So you were like one of the only guys I knew. And my very first practice at Princeton, I sit in the bow seat of an 8, and I had never in my entire life sat in the bow seat of an 8. Ever. When you're used to sitting in, 7, 6, 5, 4, sitting in the bow seat of an 8 feels like you're surfing.
Yeah.
Like it is such a different feel.
Well,
And I somehow didn't
how
fuck
you
the
fit in the
entire
bow seat.
thing up. I don't know how I fit. Somehow I didn't screw the entire boat up. I don't know how I didn't, but I did.
Well, not to insult you too much. No, you weren't the best technical rower yet. 2, you had not seen a lot of true speed at Oregon State. Justin and I were lucky that we turned things around at Northeastern and found some real speed. Luke, obviously, McGee and those guys had real speed. So, like, not only are you in Princeton, not only is it your first national team camp in 2 years, but you're in bow seat with like the strongest, fastest dudes in the country. And in like that, like when a boat's going really fast and you're in bow, that shit is different. That is different. Wow. That's a crazy experience. Like what? Can you take us a little bit just in between the gunnels for a second of like you're in that practice and you launched into Carnegie the first day of like can you take us away what it felt like, any sounds or?
I think for me, and I'd never been to Princeton before, so I was seeing the boathouse for the very first time. No, that's wrong because I think Dave took us to Princeton when we had IRA. So I had seen the boathouse, but I don't think I had seen it finished. That was the difference. I hadn't seen it completely finished. And so you show up at the Princeton boathouse, big, beautiful boathouse, just got finished today. looks like shit. But back then it was brand new. It was hot as shit. I think I got into my bed that night at like 2 a.m. So I was only running off about 4 hours of sleep. I don't even remember how I got down to the boathouse, if I rode my bike or I somehow hitched a ride. But I got down to the boathouse. I think practice started at normal time, right? Like on Saturdays, it was
7.
at 7 o'clock.
Yep, 7.
And it was hot as shit. And I remember the over the boathouse, right? Like you've got that morning haze because it's so damn hot. It's almost like soup. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, like I'm not used to rowing in extreme humidity like I felt was the case in at Princeton. And then I'm introduced to guys like Mike Teti. I think maybe Chris Korzanowski. I think maybe Chris Nielsen. Dave was there. Matt was there. A lot of people were there. And I find out I'm going in the bow seat. And of course, I get through practice. And I remember getting off the water. And the first person I went to was Matt Iams. And I was like, hey, man, how'd I do? He's like, you did really well. And I was just like, really? Because it didn't feel like he's like, no, you did really well. I think at that point, Mike had made some comments in the launch about me, seeing me for the first time, being very surprised what he was seeing. So I don't know how I did that, but Mike's first impression of me, first impressions of me were really good ones. And if I go back 2 years and I had seen him at U23 and I'd been in his face more, things would have been different. I'm telling you guys right now, things would have been a lot different. So I got very lucky that my first real impression for Mike was that morning in the bow seat in an 8 after my senior year. Like that definitely was a stage setting point for me, I think.
That's awesome. That's an awesome recap. Thank you. We often talk about that camp, and I use the word Thunderdome, and just a little perspective that you don't share because you were amazingly still one cycle, and we'll get into that. But after being in that system for 4 cycles, I still feel that summer retrospectively, not just because it was my first senior team, but the amount of talent that was in there was just epic. And we have a joke like a year in San Quentin's a year in San Quentin, right? Like that that meat grinder of a summer where everything is in such a big thing of awe for so many of us young guys. Can you take us a little bit succinctly as you can of going from that first bow practice where you have a good impression in Mike, which I honestly think is contradictory to everybody else, to right, you've just got your ass kicked by Luke Walton for 4 years, and now you wind up being in an 8 with him at the end of the summer. Can you tell me a little bit about like that? Because it's crazy. It's only 3 months that happened, and what that was like for you.
Okay, so number one, I didn't know who Luke Walton was, believe it or not.
You knew who Cal was. You knew who Cal was.
I absolutely knew who Cal was. I knew of a Luke. I knew of Walton. I knew of a Jack Nunn. I knew of a couple of other those Cal guys, but I certainly couldn't place faces. I couldn't place names on faces if I saw them. So 2 people, JR I already knew because I think JR was was JR in Cornell with us that summer?
Yeah. Yes.
So I knew who JR was. But there were 2 people that summer that I'll never forget my first impressions of them, and that one of them was Luke Walton, and one of them was Brian Volpenheim, of course. Brian's an easy one, right? Brian had an aura against him. He was the only guy that came back from the Sydney 8. He and JR had been rowing all spring at Ohio State. They had just gotten back from a World Cup event. So I think I had been at the training center for just a couple of days, maybe a week, and JR and Brian show up. And I already knew who JR was, so that wasn't really like a big to do. But I remember for the first time seeing and meeting Brian. He was just sort of kind of like heralded as the great, right? But at the same time, you had Mike Worley, you had Eric Mueller, you had Garrett Clue, you had Ryan Torgerson all training in a 4 with none other than
Jimmy Tompkins.
James Tompkins. And so they were kind of doing their own thing. You guys all remember Eric Mueller. He was just kind of the crotchety old man. But Brian and JR end up getting folded into us because I think there was a realization that the pair wasn't really fast enough to compete. And so they ended up folding us in. Now, if I think back to Luke Walton, Luke, I think you showed up the very first time. Again, this speaks to people's confidence level that Luke McGee had, that Eric Winters had. You had that same confidence where I knew the minute I met you and the minute I saw Eric and the minute I saw Luke, like I knew the three of you were in that 8 no matter what anybody did. None of us could have done anything to change that. And you were one of those guys. Correct me if I'm wrong. You ended up bow seat or 7 seat that 8?
I'll see. And Brian was 7.
Brian was 7, that's right, because JR was stroking it. And so, you had this aura of confidence about you, and Luke and Eric did. And so to me, in my mind, I'm thinking, my best chance this summer, you guys are gonna laugh. My best chance this summer is to do well enough to not get myself kicked out of here. And if I'm lucky, I'm gonna make the U23 boat this summer. That is truly, and maybe that was a conversation I had with Dave, or maybe that was a conversation I had with Mike, but I truly thought summer of 01, I was going to be lucky to make the under 23 8. That would have put me, I think I was 21 when I showed up. I would have been 22 at the end of the summer. Like that was what I thought I was competing for. Because I also thought guys like Mark Flickinger were probably a shoe-in, maybe a Jason Flickinger were a shoe-in. I never thought in a million years that I was going to make that senior team. And it probably took me until August to realize, holy shit, like I got a real shot at this. Like I got a real good shot at making this boat. And hey, man, I mean, I look back at that boat and you're right. Like that boat had some real speed to it. But what I find weird is that only 3 of those guys, and don't take this the wrong way, Luke, but only 3 of those guys ended up making the 8 in Athens, right? It was Brian, it was JR, and it was me. We were the only 3 guys in that boat from on that ended up making the 8 in Athens.
Yeah, but there's no way I'm taking that the wrong way. This is fascinating. Dan and I were talking about this before the episode. It was fascinating to see how the movement of things, right? It was like I was coming off this incredible collegiate career, and then the national team was a totally different experience for me, right? And then there were other athletes that rose and other athletes that didn't. Some guys didn't even make the Olympic team at the end of it, guys that we all collectively thought were like, oh yeah, they're going to the Olympics. Those guys are going. And so it's just wild in a lot of ways. The national team was such a reset. It wasn't a continuation of the collegiate careers into the national team. It was like a full reset, just how it went. So no, the way that I take it is I wouldn't take that any other way than the way it is, right? We give ourselves over to the process. We do the best we can. And what's, fascinating about your story is you're describing exactly what Dan and I talked about, sort of the hierarchy of things. You come in and you're like, oh, they're the guys. And you even use the word pedigree. There's those guys with pedigree and they have this and they have that. And then you actually engage the process in the national team and none of that matters. At the end of the day, none of it matters, right? And so where we all started collectively and then where we all started collectively together entering that system and that team in 2001. And then where we all ended up, which is wildly different on our paths, had nothing to do with any preconceived notions or any previous accomplishments. And so that's what's fascinating in this story for me.
Yeah, I think, I think about, after one, Dan, I don't know why you made the comment you made, but I guess I never felt like 4th place at a world championship the year after the Olympics. I personally never thought that was ever great. I never thought that was ever a good outcome. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I had so much fun that summer was one of the funnest summers I ever had. But I never got off the water after that 4th place finish thinking, wow, we've just achieved something great. And that's probably because what had they done in 97 and 98 and 99? Like we didn't live up to that at all. And I never heard a good word out of Mike about, hey, you guys did well. Mike never told us that we did well after that summer. He was not happy with 4th place. Who did we lose to? We lost to the Romanians, the Germans.
It was a better place than Sydney.
True. True, I'll give you that. But
better place than Atlanta. You know, and
But then-
again, I
but
agree with you.
our
I agree
floor-
with you. I agree with you, right? Like, again, I agree with you that not winning in that culture was a disappointment, right? And you and I talked about this a little bit. Like, so and it's like, as the outsider of that, of being in that Cox 4, which was like a complete disaster at work.
Wasn't that with you?
Jay Flickinger, Mike Bloomquist, and Dixon Gillis. And then,
Dixon Gillis.
yeah, and it was a complete disaster, right? Complete disaster. Like, Mike eviscerated us and me mostly, like, right after we got off the water. And that's right, 6. We won our heat and then got 6. And I think that, you know, I remember so clearly him in my face and me being me. I was yelling back at him. So, you know, it only made it worse. He's like, "Get the fuck out of my face, because now I gotta go coach this damn 8." You know, like, he was so frustrated with our performance that he was carrying it into your guys' pre-race speech. And you know, that, you know, in a weird way, just because of other guests, like Akil was on, that Ben's quad had the best performance. You know, they equally had a 4th, but which for them, you know, for the sculling program, that was a huge thing. So I think
Worlds with any medals?
no, we did not.
Not a single men's or women's medal.
I think the women's quad got 3rd. Isn't that what Hillary said? I forget now.
That sounds right. I remember the hottie in that boat. What was her name? Sarah something?
Yeah, Sarah Jones.
Sarah Jones, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that
Guys rolling over.
I think the interesting thing for me, and you know, I hope the audience here hears this, is going into, like, I love that you use that term "ignorance is bliss," because in some ways it was a superpower. Like, the expectation of, like, oh, if I make the U23 team, that's going to be a win for me. And then you get 4th at the Worlds, which is empirically a better performance than gold at the U23 level. And really, ironically, if, like, all of us made that U23 team, we would have won, I'm pretty sure. And you already had that sense of, like, 4th place at Worlds is no good. Like, that's it as a coach and an athlete and somebody who's been really observant of it. That's such an amazing visceral feeling of, you've just gone faster than you've ever gone in a boat and the biggest stage ever. And you're like, yeah, that ain't it. So cool. Like, so from ignorance is bliss to this isn't the standard in 3 short months is a really amazing testament to your ability and your competitive drive. And so
You're not gonna like hearing this reply to that, Dan, but I will
Sure.
tell you that was all Mike Teti. That was the impact that Mike Teti had on me. Call it good, call it bad, call it what you will, but that was Mike's impact on me. And he absolutely had me at that point. Like, I was going to be his bitch no matter what for the next umpteen years until I won a gold medal, until I made, you know, the Olympics. Like, I was going to do whatever that guy told me to do blindly without question. Cause you know me, I never questioned the guy. I did whatever the guy told me to do. And I said, yes, please, I'll have another. Like, that's just how I was with him. And so that was the effect Mike had on me.
One, I love it. Right? How can I say I'm not going to like it? Because my defiance did not allow me to have your achievement. Right? And so I think the beauty of that, and what a great segue you did naturally, is so you decided to be compliant to Mike, or eloquently, like you said, be his bitch. And so
If we're gonna use this point in time right now, can I go take a leak really quick? I gotta piss right now. I'm so bad.
yes, go.
Hold on, give me a second.
Wait, keep your earphones on. Steve, you're gonna have fun editing this one.
No, I'm here. He's like, what I miss? He's listening to everything. I just like, yeah.
Are you still rocking and rolling with
No, we finished a little bit ago. It was
Okay.
really good, but I feel trapped here. I don't know if I close computer. I'm pretty sure it's going to keep recording in the cloud, but I don't want to ruin anything, so I'm just going to sit and listen.
Dan, how do you want to come back on? Also jump in.
You know, because I'm in the corner of the student center.
So
And I'm hoping I don't get kicked out because it's spring break. I'm hoping they don't like close it and be like, "Yo, go home."
It's just go.
Justin, the good news is we only have 2.5 years left to get through before.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Fast forward.
No, I
They
think
want to move through this now.
we move through this with tell us about the ascent from 4th, 3rd to the Olympics. I think you go through.
We know the whole nother world champ.
No. So like we're just gonna like so it's like I will
program to
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. So you go.
How did you make the boat?
Like
Well, go up. Take it.
You do it.
Joey?
Disappear. I'm gonna go back and disappear since I haven't been on any of this.
You guys hear me?
Stay on. Just who cares? Just stay on. Have fun. Gotta be fun.
Just stay on.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
You're Joey.
Hear us?
You are Joey's replacement, so it's good for him to have
Yeah.
I just saw Steve show up on my screen. How you doing, Steve?
Good. Yeah. No, I've been in the background. I just haven't tried to mess with the flow at all.
All right, and also Justin's reeling me in because he knows I'll get too nostalgic. So Justin,
Yeah.
pick us up. 2001. He's now programmed to.
So I think you made up I think you made a really good point, Joey, in that like you were committed to the process, right? I think that was a way to say it, right? As opposed to being like beholden to somebody's ideals, but you were more so bought into the process and what it would take to go. You were at the top. You were in the top triangle of the pyramid, but now it was okay. How do I get to the top of the pyramid? And so I think that the question I would have is just bring us through a little bit as you kind of move through the senior team. You've obviously established, okay, I can make a senior boat, right? So you've checked that off, right? So certainly it's a ladder to be climbed. Take us into a little bit of, okay, I have a real inclination that I could probably make the Olympic team, even though it's a couple of years out in 04, and basically take us through that process of, you know, the grind, the journey, okay, I don't know if you're still living in the Aquinas or what your story is on that front. You know, you mentioned it earlier, you're engaged by this point, like, or coming close to being engaged. So like your life is changing, but you're dialed in the system and the clock is ticking to 04.
So if anybody that knows me, certainly my wife knows this about me, but I subscribe very quickly, no matter what it is in life, whether it was at Oregon State in engineering, whether it was on the national team, whether it's working for Nestle, then I worked for Mars and now I work for Niagara. Like I subscribe pretty quickly to the team that I'm on, and I almost to a fault will blindly put faith in whoever's leading, and whoever my leader is, I will blindly put faith in and trust that person. I do think sometimes it's a fault, but I also believe that it has served me well to an extent if I put trust in things. I think it does infuriate my wife from time to time because I buy in so quickly, but it's just, I don't know, it's the way I'm programmed. And so where things got real for me, Justin, was making the '02 team, believe it or not. So I made the '01 team with a bunch of basically college seniors. Brian would have been really the only one. JR, I never really knew if he was in college or not, what he was. Like, I feel like the guy was in school for like 9 years. But like, we are all a bunch of college seniors. Let's be honest, right? And so I was one of 8 or 9 college seniors. Nick Anderson, I think, was older, but so it was after I made the '02 team when I realized this is real. Like this is within my grasp. It's mine for the taking. It's up to me to screw it up or to pounce. And so because that '02 team was the entire 4 from the previous year, which we're talking about Torgy, we're talking about Garrett Klue, we're talking about Eric Mueller, and we're talking about who's the 4th from that 4.
Wolf had come back at that point.
Well, and it was Worley, and then Wolf had come back, and again, I got lucky that I was paired with Wolf. Like, I do believe that staying in a pair with Wolf as long as I did, we both learned a lot from each other. Like, Wolf was the only guy that I could row a pair with and pull as hard as I ever wanted to pull. And he could, number one, steer it, and he could keep up. Right? If you pull as hard as you want in a pair, like usually you're going to pull the boat around, no matter who you're in it with. You could be in the boat with Dave Simon. You could be in the boat with, you know, the strongest guy known to man. But if you're in the bow seat of a pair, like you can pull that boat around whenever you want. And Wolf is the only guy that could steer that boat and stroke that boat. And all I had to do was follow and pull as hard as I wanted. And so I learned, I gained a lot from Wolf. I don't know that I learned a lot of good rowing technique from Wolf. I learned a lot of good rowing technique from Luke Walton. I learned a lot of good rowing technique from Matt Deacon. I learned a lot of good rowing technique from Jeff Kopacki. But I will tell you, I learned how to race, truly race a pair from Wolf Moser. Every time Wolf and I raced at a selection regatta, the only person we ever lost to was Brian and JR. And it was like we could be, I remember one NSR I raced with Graham Taylor. Guy could row a boat. I learned a lot from Graham Taylor, but the guy did not have an ability to keep up. Like he just did not have, he didn't have the speed. He could not keep up with me. I don't want that to sound cocky, but he couldn't keep up with me. And so we never did well together.
An Olympic gold medal and a record that still stands. You can be as cocky as you want.
And so like think about it. Like I rode for weeks with Graham, and I don't know why, but we didn't do well at the NSR one. And then literally the next week, I think, what was it? Maybe 2 or 3 weeks to the next NSR. He threw me in with Wolf again, and we ended up doing really well. I'll tell you, that's the guy that I think back to in my entire rowing career that I really wish there was a 9th seat in the 8, because that's a guy that I felt was this close to making that 8. And Mike had to make an extraordinarily hard decision to not put Wolf in that 8 in 2004. Race upon seat race upon seat race upon seat race. It was Wolf just couldn't quite beat out who he beat out. And I don't know if that was Deacon. I don't know if that was JR, but he was always kind of that guy that I felt was right on the cusp. Worley might have been one of those guys. I didn't really pay too much attention to Worley. But Wolf was always that guy that I felt bad about not making that 8, because Wolf helped get me to where I was for certain. Like he was just a big part of my national team experience. And so going back to 02, he took that 4 and then put the, you know, Brian Watling, me, and I don't remember who the 4, because then Chip came in that summer. I don't remember who the 8th one was. It would have been another port. Definitely was not JR.
I'm trying to think, because I was 02. 02 is when I invented the biathlon at Worlds. So I'm trying to think of, on the port side, if it was Wolf, it went Watling, Wolf.
It was Wolf. I'm sorry. It was Wolf. Yeah, it was Wolf.
Yeah.
It was Watling, me, it was Wolf, and it was Brian. Those were the 4 plus the straight 4 from 01 that made that 8. And we went to a World Cup, and it was the first time I ever won anything. Guys, I won my first race in my entire rowing career. I think maybe we beat Stanford in a fucking duel or something, but like my very first race in my rowing career was at a World Cup in Lucerne in an 8, going extremely fast with those guys.
Yellow jersey.
He got the yellow jersey, and then we show up to freaking to Seville, Spain Worlds, and we end up getting a bronze. And man, that was a disappointment. Talk about being disappointed with 4th place. I was extremely disappointed with 3rd place, because we had shown that we could beat those guys, and we did not show up to race that day. I don't know. I mean, I'll shoulder some of that blame, but there was something about that race that day. I'm sure the winds played into it. I want to say it was either a crosswind or a tailwind, and we were not built for that. We did not have a good race that day. We ended up getting 3rd.
And it's such a fine margin of success at that level in that boat. And I still think it's like building, though. I think the key thing to think about is, like, to your point, you took the 4 guys and you put them in there. You had returning guys. Now you're the only one from that group of seniors. And I think 2 really cool things about it from both sides of that coin are, 1, you have all that experience and it gets you 1 place better. Like, yeah, you won Lucerne, but it gets you 1 place better at Worlds. And so now you have more talent. We have guys like Jeff Kopacki comes back. Bob Kaler comes back. So we're increasing experience. And
Bob never came back.
Bob did come back.
I never rode with Bob Killer.
I didn't say you rode with him, but I'm saying he came back into the training camp.
What did I do?
I don't know. He didn't make it. I know Jeff
rode.
he rode, but I'm saying so as we go into 03, the other part is like, but
Jeff
camp
did make it. Jeff did make that boat. No.
in 03, but what I'm saying is back to camp, right? So as we go from 02 to 03, we start to increase the talent pool at Princeton with vets. It starts to thin out with people that aren't making it. They can't cut it. And, two funny things that I think is fun for the audience is going into 03 is at some point you do pull a monster erg.
I pulled my fastest ergs. I pulled my fastest erg my 5th year in college. I went 5:52 because literally all I did my 5th year after my senior year was over, because I had to go back to school after 01. I had to finish off and finish my degree. I went and rode really one of the only times I got in the water. Dave would let me out in the Nate a couple of times with Josh Inman's class. But then I went and spent Christmas break with Luke down at Cal, and then we split our time between Cal and San Diego. You remember that, right, Walton?
Oh yeah, of course.
But I literally spent 6 months on the erg. I mean, I was doing 2x6K at least once a week. Dave wrote out this basically this roadmap of me to improving my erg score, because after my senior year, the fastest erg I'd ever gone was 5:58. After my 5th year, right before I showed up at camp, I went to 5:52. Like, I dropped another 6 seconds off my erg, and that was the fastest I had ever went. The next time that I really went fast, because I didn't really have to test very often after that.
And that I just had to bring that up because Bo wanted me to make sure that somehow before every 6K and 2K, you're back.
I got hurt.
Your
Yeah, I
back
got hurt. I
hurt.
got sick.
But by Monday,
Let's
you
be
were
honest.
fine.
Guys, let's be honest.
On Saturdays, your back hurt or you were sick. But on Monday,
Let's be honest, guys. Of all the erg stuff that Mike was known for, and the erg scores that he loved and touted, we didn't test that much in those 4 years. We tested K more than we tested 2K.
you didn't test all that much.
Dan, tell me, how many times did you test at Princeton doing a 2K in those 4 years?
Are you including the VO2 tests?
I
Crash
did the VO2
Bees?
test.
Or Crash Bees?
So it was Crash Bees.
That's
Crash
two.
Bees was
That's two.
Crash Bees was the time, and I somehow got out of Crash Bees I think twice. Somehow. It was awesome.
Somehow.
So the only
Somehow.
time I did a 2K in those 4 years after leaving Oregon State going 5:2 is I did a VO2 max, and I think I went, I don't know, 5:58, and that wasn't very happy. I'd just come back from my brother's wedding. It was May. I flew back from my brother's wedding, in which Mike gave me shit about for going to my brother's wedding. I was literally gone for 36 hours, and Mike gave me shit about it. But I showed up and I did a VO2 max, and I think I went 5:58 with the mask on. And then I tried, I think it was the winter before the Olympics in San Diego, Chula Vista. I wanted 5:49 really bad. And I sat next to Brian, and I made it to about 1,500 meters, and I was at 5:49 pace, and I fucking blew up, and I somehow saved a 5:55. I ended up dying. Like, I think I almost stopped, and I figured out how to pick myself back, and I ended up going 5:55, and I crashed and burned. But I do think, because I talked to Imes after that, he said, Joey, although you didn't do it, you didn't quit, and you saved it, right? I could have gone 6:03 or 6:05 or 6:10. I could have stopped and then just sort of kind of glided, but I was able to at least save a 5:55. I'll never forget it, dude. That was brutal. I have never died that hard on a 2K piece when I tried to go 5:49 and I couldn't do it. I was upset because I wanted to break 5:50, but whatever.
Well, I appreciate you letting me poke fun, but I think that, because it's so easy to get distracted and it's staying on the rails is mostly fun for the audience, but it's your talent has started to show through where you are actually an anchor to that boat. And I think getting to that 2004 selection camp, right, where we, Wyatt and I were already in Chula Vista at that point. I think that you guys all show up rarely in January. And
Why were you already there?
because I had to teach Wyatt how to row the pair.
Well, that's right, because he was coming out of the skull.
Sculling. Yeah. And I got elected / volunteered to do it. So yeah. So we, because I could scull. So the idea is that if it didn't go well, the two of us could still train with the sculling team. So, but I think two things about that 04 selection in that camp is, one, it was brutal. But two is really empirical done. We did all those pair matrices and those 4 matrices. Because of your continual success and being an anchor in that 8, because only you and Volpe stayed in that 8 all 4 years. Like JR had a stint in the straight 4. So
He wasn't in the 8 in 02 and 03, right? He was only in the 8 in 01 and 04.
I thought he was in it in 03.
No, because Torgy was bow.
JR's port.
Well, that would have been Garrett.
Garrett was in the straight 4 with me.
No, in 03?
Yes. I think I would know.
I don't remember JR being in that 8, but if he was, okay.
Yeah. But I also think what's really important is like the Canadians had won and you guys had charged from behind to just miss beating them. And I remember you and I were living together at your house, and you and Aaron had gotten married, and
We hadn't gotten married yet. We were about to get married.
yeah. But I just remember sitting there and we were talking about the race, and you're just like, God, I know we're going to get him. We're going to get him at the Olympics. Like you knew that you were one step away. And I think what's really important about that is that you had the most experience at this point, right? The guy that just showed up from Oregon State, now going to 04. And so you go into the selection camp as one of the guys. So tell us how, one, that selection to camp felt for you. And two, I'd really like to know, like, what was your edge? Like, what helped you? Because one of the through lines that we have here is everybody at that level is so good. And it is splitting hairs, and you're literally talking about fractions of a second between some athletes. So everybody has what they think is their edge. That's like, I'm the world's best at this. And I was wondering if you can articulate it. It's like, what was that edge that got you through that selection camp?
When you say selection camp, you're talking about the 11th
I'm talking
process?
Yeah. Because if I remember correctly, and luckily we have by the end of that winter training camp, 12 of us went back to Princeton early, and 11 of us made that Olympic team. He's either in a boat or as an alternate.
And you're talking about March, right around March to April.
Yeah, but I think that the Olympic team was selected in Chula Vista, other than Luke's boat in the pair.
So Mike's. Let me back up. I had gone from 3-seat to 5-seat to 7-seat between 01, 02, and 03. I was sitting behind John Watling, who Mike had told me had an extra gear that he had never seen anybody else have before. And I was able to keep up with him, and I think I was able to compliment him. First time I'd ever sat 7-seat. I was mostly a 6-5-4-3 guy. I was never a, stern pair, bow pair guy. And so I had some confidence. I will absolutely agree with that. And I had no idea what was in store. I had no idea the ratchet up that the Olympic year was going to become. But I will tell you right now, you want to talk about a great way to start the year. Deacon will tell you this. Brian and JR probably won't. Deacon and I beat Brian and JR in a time trial. Brian and JR had never been beaten. You remember we went to Henley, and they had just beaten Pinsit and Cracknell that summer. Was that summer of 03? It was, right?
Yeah, they beat
Yeah,
the Croatian. Yeah, they beat the Croatian brothers and narrowly lost to those guys, and they never replayed the last 10 strokes of the race.
Yeah. Needless to say, Deacon and I beat Brian and JR, who probably didn't take it as seriously as we did. I'll give him that. But we beat them in the fall of 03 going into 04, right? Going into the Olympic year. That obviously gave me some confidence. Not much that I remember about 2004 Chula Vista, except that it was a shit ton of pair racing. I don't remember the 4 stuff. You just mentioned 4s. I don't remember doing a lot of 4 work. I obviously remember all the pair work. I remember rowing with guys. I remember rowing with Kopacki for the first time in a pair. I remember rowing with freaking Jason Flick in a pair somehow. I don't know how that happened. Yeah, did he flip? Because we were both always starboard guys, and I don't know if he moved. I don't know if he flipped Jason for a time. Something. I ended up rowing with Jason for the first time. But that was also the first time where Mike asked us who we thought should be in these boats. Were you ever part of those discussions with Mike where he would pull you aside in the office and say who should be in the 8?
I mean, I started off because I was in the straight 4. I started off in the B group with Hoopman, and then he and I had to, in the first round of matrices, had to earn our way into the A group. But yes, towards the end, it was who was going to be in those boats, and that's what I'm saying is like that wound up being the 12 guys that went back early. That wound up making.
Mike had never asked me or anybody else for that matter who should be in the 8. Never had he asked me. And literally I'm sitting in his office and he's making me fill out who should be in the 8, who should be who should be stroking, who should be in the bow seat, like what my 8 should be. I don't remember who that should be. I don't remember who I called out in it. But I just remember thinking, this is different. This is weird. And the other thing I really remember about selection in '04 was, God, I hate it. Man, I still think about it. Do you remember the blue and the red T-shirts and the freaking national anthems that we had to listen to between the British national anthem and the Canadian national anthem? How many times we listened to the freaking Canadian national anthem? My God.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so just you guys go down memory lane here, but no, but I think it's important for the audience, because that's certainly a motivator. So I have a question, but explain what was going on. Like, basically, was Mike just blasting the national anthem on the megaphone or something of Canada?
Blue T-shirts that said Great Britain and red
Yeah.
T-shirts that said Canada.
He
It,
made
it
us
was
wear
like
this.
penny. It was like penny basketball, right? Like flip
Yeah.
the penny over for reversible.
He would make us row these pieces in blue and red T-shirts. Whoever won, say that the red T-shirts won, we'd go back, we listen to the freaking Canadian national anthem. The next day, a week later, he'd make us throw on the T-shirts again in a different lineups, and the blue T-shirts would win, and so we'd come back and listen to the British national anthem. Like it was made us hate Canada and Britain so bad, and to this day, guys, like I can't stand those two countries. Like I can't stand losing to them. I can't stand watching them beat us in the Olympics. Like I don't enjoy things about Canada or Great Britain because of that, I think.
Okay, thank you for explaining.
Yeah.
I want to go back real quick, and then we'll press on. When you're talking about it feels different, so just to reset real quick, like you in 2000, in a short period of time, so in 2001, less than 3.5 years before this, sitting in his office, like you're hoping to make an under 23 boat, by the end of that summer. Now all of a sudden you're filling out a lineup with Mike Teti, who you basically like were number 2 look at Oregon State doing a 500-meter piece 4 years before this. So was that surreal? Was that like, what the hell am I doing sitting here writing a pencil lineup? Or was it like, I'm glad you asked my opinion. I do believe I'm going to write my own name down. Like, how did that go in your mind? Or I don't even know if you could comprehend it at that point.
I absolutely did. It
Okay.
was not surreal. It was not incomprehensible. It was alien. It didn't feel right. It
Okay.
was not not the Mike Teti that I had come to know and understand. Mike had all the answers. Mike was never a guy that I questioned, and here he was questioning me on what I thought. He had never asked my opinion before. It was actually probably a point in time where I had doubts about where we were going because it was so weird and so different and so alien. So it was probably a time in my rowing career where I felt like something doesn't feel right here, and maybe Mike doesn't have all the answers. I don't think that lasted very long, Justin. Like I'll tell
Yeah,
you,
sure.
like I said before, like I do blindly follow. I do tend to do that. But it was very, and it was one of those things where it was like, everybody would ask you, like, how did it go? You go back to your room and be like, hey, he did it with you today. What did you say? And so it was just a lot of us questioning, you know, like what the hell's going on? This is the Olympic year. Like it shouldn't be like this, you know, that kind of stuff. Cause it was just it was so different.
Yeah.
But man, I mean, we left there at the end of March and it just felt like the eights or the fours that I was part of. I mean, I can't speak to who they were with, but we just kept getting faster and faster and faster. And then again, another weird moment is when he took the four and he took the eight, and we went to Lucerne, and the top four guys were in the four, and I wasn't in there. And the next eight guys were in an eight together, and the eight didn't do so well, and the four won. And that's when I thought, shit, I'm going to be in the B boat right now. The eight's going to be the B boat. And I missed out on the A boat.
Wow, what an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
it was not a good that no matter who you talk to, I got to think Aaron's would say the same thing. Watling would say the same thing. Anybody that was in that eight was probably really depressed, extremely depressed, because the four had just won with Beery and Hoopman, of course, JR and wait, was it Beery and Hoopman? No, it was
Yeah.
Beery and was it? Yeah,
Very Volpe and JR.
yeah, Volpe and JR. And had just won with Beery and Hoopman, and neither of those two guys had ever been in an eight before, and had never been considered a top contender. And then here they were; they found themselves in the fastest four in the world at the time. And they had just won; they were on top of the world, and we were. I would say some of us were crushed. I definitely was, but yeah, that was not a good time. And somehow, some way, and I have to believe Brian played a huge role in this. Somehow, some way, a decision was made to take those four guys out and put them back in the eight.
Being privy to the legacy that you guys left and trying to carry it on for the next two cycles from, you know, it's interesting. I missed out on that trip because I got switched with Watling the day before we left, right? So Beery, he gets arrested and shows up with Mike's car impounded. And it was like, you guys better go fast or you're cut. I got switched with Watling, and you know, I have my own narrative about it, and it's nothing but we went out in 2.8s in the first piece. We had, you know, I was in the boat with JR and Volpe, and they didn't really take it seriously, and we lost by a hair. And then he switches me and Watling, and JR and Volpe were pissed, and they win by more. And you know, it'd be interesting to get Watling on the show and talk to him, but he would, you know, he came up to me after practice and said, "Hey man, I don't think that was a fair shot." And I was like, "It is what it is, man. I lost the seat race to you. You're going to Lucerne, and I'm not." And you know, I remember him saying, "Is like that's you should be the one going, not me." And so, you know, and like I'm saying, like that, it is what it is. But then watching, right, staying back, and then I had to go through trials with Schroeder against Luke and Artur, and you know, but what happened is we had kind of at that point 3 fours. So it was the 4 that won Lucerne, and then you 4, and then it was Aaron's, you, Wyatt, and Volt. No, it was who was. Nope, Wolf wasn't in that 4 either. It was who was the other 4 guys that?
Then Deacon.
Yeah, Deacon, and then a 4 that was me, Wolf, Garrett, or no, me, Wolf, Worley, and Schroeder. And your all 3 fours were close, but your 4 won some pieces. And then that's what really made Mike realize that, well, if this 4 is beating the 4 that just won Lucerne, then that's going to be let's see what they look like in an 8. And then there was that mysterious weekend where you guys went sub 4 minutes, and then selection just stopped for the 8, but no one said anything. And then you guys were the super secret Olympic 8 and the rest of us were still selecting for the 4.
Yeah, no, I do remember some of that. I definitely, obviously, don't remember it as probably as vividly as you do, being on the other.
I just had to hear Mike repeat the story a million times.
I will tell you, you guys, when those 8 got into a boat together, as corny and as dumb as this might sound, like there was something different about the feel of that boat. You guys, and I'm not lying when I say this. I can remember going out one day and literally rowing square blade the entire practice. If we hit the water once, I don't remember. We could row 36 strokes a minute square blade. We could row at 18 strokes a minute square blade. It was just, there were just some days that were very memorable. There were honestly, Walton, there were a couple of days that I felt like that my first year in '01. Do you remember when Ed from Row 2K came out and took a bunch of pictures of us
Oh
and
yeah.
posted them online?
Oh
I
yeah.
remember some of those practices being magical. Now, my level of knowledge on magical in '01 versus '04 was significantly different, but I do remember some times in '01 where I felt that way, and I absolutely remember some practices in '04 before leaving to both Bulgaria and obviously off to Athens that I just remember thinking like, I have to remember this. Like these are the moments in my rowing career that I need to think back to because these are the times that were absolutely phenomenal. Like, yeah, winning some races were great, but like actually rowing in an 8 that was that rock solid, that was that fast, that was that light. No matter how hard you pulled, it didn't matter what you did in the boat. It wouldn't check the boat. It wouldn't change the boat. Like, you just do whatever you want, and the boat would stay rock solid. Like there were just some magical days like that. And maybe Dan, maybe Mike saw that. Maybe what I was feeling is what Mike saw. Maybe what some of us were feeling and the feedback that Brian was constantly giving him about the 8. Maybe that is what convinced Mike. That's what I have to believe is what convinced Mike that that was the 8 that he was.
No, look, man, it being, being the outsider of it and being the insider of it 4 years later is it's magical. There's no other way to put it. It's magical and it's visceral and it's captivating, right? It's sports at that level is captivating, and I think that you got it's all deserved and earned. And at a certain point, when you have a boat that's breaking 4 minutes for 1,500, like you just kind of got to think like, okay, that's pushing the limits. And I think I'd love to hear from you, and I think Justin, I would like you to set it up, but like we know the story, and unfortunately for you, you're not the only person, you're not the first person from your boat being here. One of the really unique things that we've discovered about rowing is it's the only sport where the boat crosses the finish line as one, but there's so many shared perspectives of how it happened. And so, Justin, baby, do your thing and take us away to race
No,
day.
no, Joey. So what we have asked a couple of guests to do is there's only first of all there's only 9 guys that win Olympic gold every 4 years, and in aggregate, there's only a few hundred men that have won an Olympic gold medal in history. So rarefied air. That said, what's really cool is not everybody's perspective on that Olympic final is the same. So would love if you could put us in the boat for what you recall of the race day or that race of just going down the course, right? Because I think that there's only 5.5-ish, maybe more, maybe less minutes every 4 years that somebody gets to participate in a winning moment. So it's been really cool to hear people's first person perspective and point of view of like, this was the race. This is what I remember. If you can.
Yeah, certainly. I was finding myself in a place where I was like Brian's relief. I had rarely stroked pairs. I don't know that I ever stroked a 4. And all of a sudden, weeks before Athens, Mike's putting me in stroke seat of the 8 to give Brian rest. I do believe that there was maybe some bigger reasons for that. I think that Mike maybe thought that if I had continued rowing, that maybe I would have been a contender to be a stroke in the 8s, maybe, in the latter years. Somehow, for some reason, he maybe thought I had the ability to do that. So I was finding myself in the stroke seat or in 4 seat for the Olympic Games. And so, you guys know we had set a world's best time in the heat. We beat Canada by God, man, the freaking bee stick. I mean, it was not very much, but we set a world record, as did they, right? We're just slightly faster than them. And we get to game day, we get to finals day. We hadn't raced in what, 7 or 8 days between the heat and the final. Completely different conditions. Heat was a blazing tailwind. Final was a decently strong headwind. It wasn't the worst headwind we'd ever been in, but it was a decent headwind. And we just got finished with setting a world's best time in a tailwind that none of us felt that we were a very technically gifted enough boat to be able to do that. I believe that there were more technically gifted boats in that field at the Olympics that could row in a tailwind better. We somehow figured out how to take advantage of it and do it really well that day. So we show up to the race course with a headwind, and I think all of us just smiled. I literally think we salivated and smiled when we saw that, because I truly felt that we thought we were the better or the best headwind team. You guys know the story. Mike somehow convinced Carl Lewis to come talk to us before the race. So you got it's hot, it's windy, it's hot. Carl Lewis shows up in a wife beater, a white wife beater, and motivates us. He tells us about a little bit of his experiences. I don't remember all the details. I just remember seeing what a physical specimen that guy was. Literally 20 years after so he would probably been in his mid to late 40s, if I had to guess. The dude was a specimen, and he shows up in a wife beater and he's jacked. And I just remember thinking, like, holy shit, like, this guy's awesome. And he's talking to us, and he's got back to back to back gold medals from 84, 88, 92, something like that. I don't know. Maybe I got my years wrong, but wow, Carl Lewis is talking to us about, seize the moment. This is your time. Go out there and win. Rah, rah, rah. Mike was typically that guy, and Mike just took a step back and let Carl Lewis do it. I do think that Mike was extremely confident, but I also think he was extremely nervous, because I think it was ours for the taking. We had proved it. And I think that he had seen what we thought was the best contender in Canada. I think he had seen, although he didn't really share with us, he had seen them falter. So I think in the back of his mind, he knew that Canada was probably going to do what he did in Sydney. I think he kind of knew Canada was on the verge of doing the same thing. They weren't next to us, right? It was the Aussies and the Dutch that ended up being next to us. But in typical Brian Volpenheim fashion, we go out and we have a very, very scripted 40 or 45-minute warm-up, and Brian cuts it short after like 25 minutes. I wasn't in love with the idea. Again, I blindly follow. I'm a blind follower, right? Like, the script said 40-minute or 45-minute warm-up. We must do this many starts. We must do this many sprints. We must do this much steady state rowing. And we didn't do it. But that just like speaks to Brian's level of like knowing himself, knowing his body, knowing the boat feel, knowing more about about rowing than I ever will, in my ignorance, right? Because he knew that 25 minutes was enough. Whatever he felt was enough. And he couldn't have been more right. You guys, like, you've seen the tape, maybe not as much as I have, but you've seen it. Like, we blasted off the line faster than we've ever blasted off a line before. We literally left Canada in the dust, who was always going to take the lead in the first 500 meters. And we were far ahead of them in the first 500 meters. And I will tell you, I don't think there's a guy in the boat that would say differently. We were up at 500 meters by how much we were up, and we pushed out to an even farther lead at 1,000. There was no way we were losing that race. There just was no way. I have never raced from that far in front, ever. I've never watched everybody in the field at 1,000 meters. I've won races at the end by that much, but to be that far up in the middle of a race and be watching the field in my periphery, I've never experienced that.
So you're coming through 1,000. You got everybody off the stern. Is there internal dialogue going on for you, or is it just like?
Oh, there's both. There's internal and there's external dialogue. I was sitting behind Deacon. I was talking in Deacon's ear. I heard JR. There was both internal and external dialogue. JR was a talker. You wouldn't typically hear me throughout the boat like you would with JR, but like I would talk to Deacon, and I would, I'd yell some things at him from time to time. But I think the internal dialogue was, holy shit, like, we're going to do this. Like, we're 2 minutes, 45 seconds away from doing this. And short of somebody catching a crab, like, there was nothing that was going to stop us. And yeah, we saw the Aussies and we saw the Dutch, but I don't think any of us ever felt like they were contenders at that point. I mean, we did jack it up at the end, certainly not like we jacked it up at the end of and we put on a little bit of a sprint, but we didn't put on the sprint of a lifetime to finish that race. You know, yeah, they were coming back into us, but there was no way they were going to catch us with the amount of distance that we had left in the race. And so, you know, crossing the finish line, man, it was, I mean, man, I'd love to go back and relive that. It was one of the best times of my life ever, right? You know, having kids, getting married, that race, you know, those are the things that you'd love, you know, when you're on your deathbed, that you could somehow go relive a couple hundred more times. But pretty amazing feeling, guys. I mean, it was sheer, it was certainly sheer bliss for a long time. I would say probably a good couple of weeks. It was there it was definitely a blissful feeling. And I would say that finally ended. The last time I probably felt that way was head of the Charles that year, when we got to the closest I'll ever be to feeling um, like a movie star or somebody famous. Head of the Charles was pretty special, right? We rode down the course, standing ovations, got to go back in the tent and sign autographs for the next hour or two, like from the Olympics all the way through to Head of the Charles. I was feeling pretty good about myself. Certainly had every intention of doing another 4 years. That only lasted about another 3 or 4 months, because by February of '05, I basically said I was done. And that was in large part due to not being able to find a job and start a career and move on with my life, to any extent. Like, I just wasn't having any success in that. And that's when I basically said, okay, I'm gonna hang it up, at least for a little while. I'm gonna take a year off or so. So sorry, I kind of went into that really quickly, but yeah,
No,
finishing that race was pretty amazing, right? You one of the greatest things about rowing is you go right off the water, and you go right to get your medal. There's no waiting around. I trying to remember if I had to get drug tested before the medal or after the medal. But very quickly after getting off the water, we had to piss and get drug tested. I was lucky enough to have a medal put around my neck by Matthew Pinsett. Another thing that you'll never forget, right? You hear all these stories about Matthew Pinsett, and he's the one putting the medal around your neck and listen to the national anthem. I had family members that were there: my mom, my dad, my brother, his wife. I had my uncle, a couple of my cousins. I had my in-laws, because I was married. I was the, you know, only one of two guys on the boat that was married, me and Chris Aarons. So I had my wife and my in-laws there. I see in the distance, you know, after getting the medal put around my neck and listening to the national anthem, I see my dad, who had literally run all the way around to the grandstands because he was on the other side. Listening to the national anthem, I looked up at him, and the dude's crying, bawling his eyes out. You guys may not know this, but my dad's not an American citizen. He's a Danish citizen. He's never gotten a citizenship, even to this day. He's a green card holder, and he was every time he hears the national anthem, he cries, and this was probably the worst I'd ever seen him cry. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things about that moment and that time that I'll never forget.
no, thank you for
Do
sharing
that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, I had having the best seat in the house, and literally the best seat in your house, Joey. It's a true amazing honor to have been witness to all that. And you know, I really appreciate you being here with us and sharing it, like really intimate details. And it's like I said, I think you're this really cool anomaly in the whole thing, both because of how you how you discovered rowing, how you navigated through it, how you had this progression of fourth, third, second, first, you know, how you left it, and you left that legacy, um, to where you are now, and getting that job and moving on and starting a family, and really just being the amazing athlete and person and friend you are. And we've had you here for almost 2.5 hours, and like I said to you, you were like, what's this going to be, like 45 minutes, an hour? I was like, we'll see, you know. But got one more question for you. And this is just this is really for the audience, and especially for the young athletes out there that may be watching this. But if you could go back in time at any point in your career and coach yourself, when would it be, and what would you say?
And coach myself. Oh, look, you just got through saying, like, I recognize that I've had a pretty lucky and storied rowing career. Yeah, there's times in my life where I think about, hey, what another 4 years have been like. But then I see the outcome of '08, and if I had, well, I shouldn't say that. I think I would have been just as excited to have won a medal in '08, but a piece of me would not have been able to leave the sport in '08 like I was able to in '04. And so when you ask me how would I have coached myself, when you say that, the first thing I think about is, do I have any regrets, was there a time in my life that I regretted anything? And if I could have gone back to change that point in time so that I didn't regret it anymore, what would I say to myself? I don't know that I have much regret in my life thus far. I've always tried to live my life without regrets. And that to me is just a frame of mind. That to me is just telling yourself and convincing yourself that you've done everything you could have done. Sure, there's things you could have done differently, but even if you would have done those things differently, would there really have been a different outcome? I don't know. I don't regret much, if not anything in my life. I feel extremely fortunate for what Aaron and I have built. I absolutely have to and will always give credit to Aaron for most, if not all, of my success, whether it was in college, whether it was in the national team, whether it's in raising our family, whether it's my career. Like, Erin has been an extremely big part of that. I've not done anything without her. Sure, I made it to college without her, but you could make the argument that a big part of me getting to college was my parents, right? Good parenting. So Erin has been through everything with me. I don't regret anything that we've done together. I think the only coaching that I would give myself, and I have to be careful in the way I say this, because if I convince myself that I should have done this differently, maybe the outcome would have been different. But I think if I could coach myself, I would go back and try to tell myself, just try to enjoy it a little bit more. Try to understand the moment, and try to be in the moment a little more, rather than worrying about what's next and what the future is. I always worry too much about the future, whether that's in my job, whether that's in my rowing career, my college career. Like, I'm so fixated on the next thing, or the future goal, and I don't take enough time to enjoy the moment. Guys, I am gonna tear up saying this, but I mean, I'm 4 months away from my daughter leaving. Like, 18 years has gone by with my daughter, and it feels like that. And so, like, I wish, no matter what it is in my life, that I could slow things down and enjoy the moment a little bit more. Because, man, we are 45 years old and life is half over, right?
We're lucky.
Dude,
I don't know. That's
what
the
a
best way I can answer that.
what a powerful, powerful way to end. Joey, man, I love you, man. And I know you know that. Irony is I never got to row with you.
Right.
I've been through so much vicariously with each other, and literally, you and Aaron took me to house, and look, Buckley is the shit. She knows it. I know it. We all know it. And your story is only storied because you just got to share it. And I think that I love that you remind us all to try and stay present, because it all is fleeting. And I appreciate for you slowing it down for us this past couple of hours, and putting this into the archive, man. American and Rowing is very lucky to have you. So thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for representing our sport at the highest level. And dude, you are always welcome back.
Oh,
Appreciate that, man. I've had a blast, you
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today's show. Fast Friends is a Metal Factory production. All opinions expressed are our own and those of our guests. If you like our show, follow along or subscribe with us wherever you get your content and podcasts. Thanks for listening.